Hi, welcome to Mums All Together. My name is Katie and I'm joined by the lovely Sam today. And we're going to take you through a restore glute section. Really important to keep those glutes strong, especially post-baby, and keep our pelvis nice and ready for action. So we're going to bring ourselves down over here. We're going to start standing today. So I'm going to just bring my toes and my heels about hip width distance apart and a little bit of softness in my knees. I'm going to place one hand on my breastbone and the other hand I'm just going to place on where my pubic bone sits, and I want my breastbone to be above or slightly forward of where my pubic bone sits for this. Bend into the knees and find whatever position for the pelvis you need. So you can practice taking a little pelvic tilt with me here just to find that sweet spot of where it is you need to be. From here, we're going to take a diagonal position of the body forward. So lengthen the body forward onto that diagonal. Sorry, Sam, completely square, but just spine like a diagonal. Beautiful. And from here, I want you to practice about where the weight is in your feet. So see what it's like if you take the weight forward into your toes, and what it's like if you slide it back into your heels. And we want to find about 60% of that weight into the toes, but we also want to feel like we really do connect through the heels. We can bring the hands to the hips here now, and we're transferring our weight onto our left leg. So transfer the weight onto the left leg and just bring the heel of the right leg off the floor. And we're going to take a little bend and stretch here. As we bend, slide into your heel and slide your hips back. So we're taking a bend and a lift. Keep that right heel nice and high. Bend and lift. And I really am thinking of driving my heel into the floor as I bend. Good. Exhale. Breathe as you go. And the more you think of really connecting that heel into the floor, the more you should find that that glute really wants to turn on and fire. We're going to take 4 more. 4 and lift. 3 and lift. Last 2 and lift. Last one, we're going to hold that bend. I'm going to bring my hands in front of me and I'm going to take a little pulse down through that heel. Pulse down, pulse down, pulse down, pulse down. We've got 8 and 7 and 6, 5. Don't just send yourself down, send yourself back and out. Last 2, last one, hold that bend. Challenge is to see if you can tap your lifted heel back and center. So tap it back, tap it center. Extend the leg out behind you, tap it behind you and center. Tap it behind you and center. Tap it behind you and center. Brilliant. 4 more. 4. How's that glute feeling, Sam? 3. Last 2. Last 1. Come all the way back together. Lift up and just give yourself a little wiggle. Feel that sit. Heels underneath your hips once again, toes tracking forward. Find softness in the knees. Breastbone above or forward of the pubic bone. And slide into a little bit more of an exaggerated bend, finding that diagonal position for your spine. And here, don't be afraid to play around with your pelvic positioning. So find a scoop underneath, find an extension back, find a scoop underneath, find a pelvic tilt in this position to know where it is you need to be for your back. And you don't have to be in a straight line. You can be slightly scooped underneath or slightly extended out. So find where it feels the best for you. From here, we're going to lift the opposite heel off the floor, and I'm going to try and take that weight up towards my tiptoe. And we're going to take a bend and stretch. Bend and stretch. And I want you to really feel like you're driving and resisting that heel into the floor. Drive and resist, lift. Drive and resist, lift. Beautiful. Keep driving that heel in. And sliding your pelvis back and down. So if you imagine your diagonal spine should be moving up and down on that diagonal. Let's go 4 more. Breathe. 4 and lift. Breathe. 3 and lift. Drive through that heel. Try not to press through the ball of the foot or the toes. Keep driving through that heel. Last one, hold that bend and find that diagonal position. Just check in that you feel like the front of the body is supporting the back of the body and you're lifting to support the back. From here, we're going to take a little pulse into that standing leg. I'm going to bring my hands in front of me, pulsing down, down, down. Let's count it down. We've got 8, 7, 6, 5, last 4, 3, 2, hold the bend, tap the leg behind you and center. Tap it behind you and center. Tap it behind you and center. Keep driving the heel into the floor. You might even want to feel like you're bringing your toes off the floor to keep it concentrated in the heel. Last 2, last 1. Lower that heel, press into the heels and stand up. Nice. Hopefully the butt should be feeling definitely awake by now. We're going to take a walk back to the back of our mats. Inhale, lift tall, exhale, head, neck and shoulders roll down, soften the knees. Just find a little hanging space for your spine on the way down. And then we're going to come and walk our hands forward onto the mat. From a 4-point kneeling position, I'm going to relax my toes, slide my arm underneath and roll just to find myself side lying on the floor. I'm actually going to place my arm long up here and rest my ear onto my arm. My top hand is coming in front of my rib cage and I'm going to press into the floor and I'm going to take my heels back so they're stacked about level with my hips. But this is different for everybody, so know that you can always bring the knees up forward or you can always take the knees back as long as you feel like this is working the outside of the leg and the glute rather than the front of the leg and your quad. I want you to imagine that I've given you a Malteser and you're going to slide that Malteser underneath your side waistline. Keep the fingertips pressing into the floor. My heels are connected and I'm going to lift my top leg. Now, I don't want you to think of just lifting this leg up. I want you to think that your hips are staying completely still, but your thigh bone is trying to reach out on the diagonal and then see if you can get a little bit more lift. And it should just feel a little bit more effective to think of lengthening that thigh bone away rather than just lifting up. We're going to lower it down to about halfway and then we're going to exhale and lift it up again. Lowering to about halfway and then lifting up. Lowering and lifting. Try not to think of going up. Try to really think of lengthening out here. And try to keep lifting away from the imaginary Malteser. Last 4. Last 3. Last 2. Last 1, hold it open and give me a tiny top range pulse. Find that 90% and just find a little pulse into that area. 8, 7, 6, 5, last 4, last 3, last 2, last 1, hold it up, don't collapse. Flex your top heel and lift the top leg up. I want you to bring your thigh bone in towards your nose and then kick the leg back and away on a long lever. So as that leg is extended, you're still keeping your hips as square as you can, but trying to find a little bit of a stretch across the front of that hip. Inhale, knee comes in. Exhale, press away and lengthen out. Try to keep the knee at the same height as the hip on the press and on that press back. Coming forwards, lengthening out. And at the very end of that heel kick back, don't be afraid to pop your fingertips onto your butt and make sure that it is your glute working. With a straight leg and the lengthened back, it should feel like the glute is really letting that action happen rather than it be the disassociation between ribs and hips. Last 2. And Last one, we're going to hold this one out long. So press the heel out and press it back and away from you. And I want you to really feel like you're using your glute to kick your heel behind you. Exhale, press. Exhale, press. Exhale, press. Exhale, press. For 4, for 3, last 2, last 1, and relax. We're going to stay on this side, and this time we're going to lengthen out both of our legs. Keep your top hand in front of your rib cage and keep that imaginary Malteser lift. I'm going to flex my top heel as I lift it and keep it parallel, inner thigh level with the floor, lifting and lowering, lifting and lowering. And again, even though my focus is that I am lifting the leg, I want it to actually be that I'm driving out through that heel and finding length out of the top of the hip. Last 4, last 3, last 2, last one. We're going to hold this up and then we're going to find an external rotation. Externally rotate, parallel. Externally rotate, parallel. Externally rotate, parallel. Externally rotate, parallel. 4 more. Externally rotate, parallel, externally rotate, parallel. Last 2, externally rotate, find parallel, externally rotate, find that external rotation and hold on to it. Choice with this arm is to leave it here or lengthen it up above your head. Exhale as your elbow and your arm come together. You can do this with the arm in front, just firing the knee in towards the shoulder. And we're going to go for 4 more. Last 4. Keep breathing. Last 3. Keep lifting up off that imaginary Malteser. Last 2. And last 1. Lengthen it out. Lengthen, lengthen, lengthen. And relax. I'm going to let my knee bend and come in front of me and just take a second, maybe beat that glute back into life a little. And then we're going to press into the floor to lift up and replace ourselves to the other side safely. Arm is long, ear on arm, hand in front of rib cage, and remembering that the heels are stacked, but they can be anywhere along this plane as long as it feels like the right spot for you. Hips are stacked, imaginary Malteser under your side waistline. Exhale to lift the leg. Inhale to lower. And you really want to think of giving your thigh bone length out of your hip socket. Breathing. The more you can think of keeping your ribs and hips connected at the same time, ironically, the more you're actually going to feel this in your butt. The minute that this increases or we relax into the floor, biomechanically, we just lose access to that really good glute activation. Keep breathing. Good. We're going to go for 4 more of these. 4. Last 3. Last 2. Last one, we're going to hold this open at top range and find that teeny tiny top range pulse. Pulse and lengthen. Pulse and lengthen. Really think of lengthening out that thigh bone as you pulse. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, don't collapse. I'm going to flex my top heel and bring that leg off, and I'm going to fire it towards my nose parallel. And I'm going to kick it out long and press that thigh back, 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 and then bring it back in. And you want to feel like you're almost giving your front of your hip lots of space. So if you're spending a lot of time seated, this is a really nice one just for creating that beautiful space around the hip. Hard to remember to keep breathing, so just remember to breathe. And think of that imaginary Malteser under the waistline. Always lengthening out to press back and in. Last 2. Your last one, hold that press, lengthen the thigh bone back, and don't be afraid just to put your hands on your butt. Is it active? Do you feel like it's on? Keep lengthening the leg away from you. And you're going to find a pulse back, but activate it from your butt, not from your thigh or your hip. Press and squeeze, press and squeeze, press and squeeze, press and squeeze. We've got 4, we've got 3, last 2, last 2, I'm kidding, last 1, and relax it down. From here, we're going to lengthen out both of the legs. I'm going to flex my top heel. You can flex both of them if you prefer, but just making sure that you feel like you have a nice pressure out through this leg. Stays parallel as we lift and lower. Should feel especially effective after that last little clam sequence. Again, we're still trying to keep the hips stacked one on top of another. So be mindful that naturally your body will either want to roll you back or roll you forward. As much as you can, stay level and stay stacked. I know for myself, I press through these front fingertips and then all of a sudden I'm taking that tension in my shoulder. So make sure that your shoulders just stay relaxed, as does your jaw. Last 2. Last one, hold it up, and we're finding that external rotation. External rotation, internal rotation. External rotation, internal rotation. And it doesn't matter how much range you have, it's just about finding what movement is there. Last 4, last 3, last 2. How's my imaginary Malteser doing? Last one, hold the external rotation. Choice is to keep the hand where it is or float it above your head and take your elbow to your knee. Exhale together, inhale out. Breathe. And breathe. Absolutely fine to keep that hand down and just bringing that knee in towards the shoulder, finding whatever range is good for you. If your range is small and it's here, that's fine. Last 4. Last 3. Last 2. And last 1. Lengthen out. And come back down. From here, we're going to roll onto our fronts. So you're going to take your feet about as wide as a mat if you're using a mat, wider than your hips if you're not. And from here, I'm just going to get you to place your forearms in underneath your shoulders and find a little sink through the upper body. From here, I'm going to get you to lengthen your right leg away from you as far as you can without lifting it and come back in. So it's a really subtle action. Lengthen and recover. Lengthen and recover. Lengthen and recover. Now, if you're happy here, feel free to stay here. Options are to fold your hands one on top of another. And from here, still keep the same action, but if you want it, the choice is there to lift the leg. Now, we're keeping the legs wide for a reason. So when we have the legs wider, there's less chance of this really impacting into the lower back. But if you find this is working your lower back too much, just omit this exercise and maybe come to a child's pose stretch. We're taking 4 more. Last 4. Last 3. Last 2. And last one. From here, we are going to come to a child's pose stretch for a second. Press into the hands, press into the knees, slide up and back into a child's pose. When you're ready, scoop, tuck, and roll yourself up. And let's take a little stretch out for our seat. So we're going to roll back onto our backs, cross one foot over the thigh bone, scoop in, and find a seat stretch. If you prefer, you can keep this foot on the floor, or if you're having trouble finding this stretch, this is quite a nice one to do against a wall. So you can pop this foot against a wall or on top of a sofa or next to a coffee table, whatever you have handy. And try to keep your weight centered on your tailbone. So if you feel like your weight is dropping towards one side, try and bring it back to center. To increase this stretch, you can actually cross the leg over the midline of the body. And because we have the floor, we have a nice flat back, which means, again, biomechanically, we're just more likely to access piriformis. When you're ready, pop that foot down, other foot across, finding a little stretch and release. Feel free to hold behind the thigh. Also, if you feel like it's available, you can hold across the top of the shin bone. Whatever feels nice for you. And be mindful of where that weight is on the sacrum. So see if you can perhaps take that foot a little further across. And when you're ready, bring yourself back to center, roll to the floor, and come all the way to sitting. Thanks so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed it. Let us know in the comments. Tell us what you liked and tell us what you'd love to see more of. And we'll see you next time.